All right. Welcome back to our next episode of a live stream. Ask Me Anything here at We the Govern. I hope this is all working. I've had some technical problems getting it set up, which is entirely due to incompetence and technical failures on my part. But hopefully the show will progress. And it looks like one of my problems was I was trying to get the pop-out chat screen working, and I think I got it working. So we'll see if it works. After all, what kind of a live stream Ask Me Anything video would we have here if what would happen is you weren't going to be able to ask any questions? So that'd be tough for me to do without the pop-out screen here. So hopefully this all works just fine, and we'll get the show on the road. So once again, for those of you who haven't done one of these before, this is an Ask Me Anything. You'll see either the questions down below the screen or sometimes the side, depends on whether you're looking at me on your phone or on a computer. But feel free to type in any questions that you might have for me. No guarantees you're going to like the answer, but I will do my best to answer them. And I do try to answer, go through the questions basically in the order in which they're posted. But it's a little bit easier for me to pick out your question from a lot of different commentary, which goes back and forth. We love the commentary. That's great for activity on the channel, but for me to find the question, sometimes just a little bit easier if you hit the @WeTheGoverned. No period after that, and try to spell it correctly. It just pops out a little bit easier for me to spot it. So as we get going, and I see a lot of questions starting to pile up in the corner here, and I will make sure this pop-out chat is a little bit more obvious for me. Let me go through a couple of places where I'm going to be speaking or putting on some training sessions or whatever over the next couple weeks. Number one, if you live out in Gig Harbor and you want to do a Doge Washington training class, it's a little different. I'm kind of orienting this for some people maybe that have a little more of a law enforcement background, or for those of you who want to dig into some specific projects. But if you happen to be out there, it'll be a little different than some of the classes I've done in the past. It's a little bit longer, and it's going to be at the Eagles Club in Gig Harbor. It's 11 to 3, and I realize there is a game after that at 5 o'clock, so probably many people will be too distracted to come to it. But it looked to me when I last checked, there's about 40 people that are going to be there. This one, they're charging $25 to go to this event. But listen, I'm looking forward to seeing anybody out there this Saturday. For those of you who want to learn more about how to dig up, whether it's Somali fraud or just generic day-to-day, everyday at work fraud in Washington State. The opportunities are endless. You're going to find massive amounts of tax dollars that are squandered and wasted every day. Hence the reason why they're trying to raise taxes in Olympia. Tuesday on the 20th, the KCGOP is hosting me to come out to King County at Berrien specifically, and I believe that it's the Hope Church. I sure hope I wrote that down correctly because I was going off of memory here, and I think that starts around 6 or 6:30, and I will be doing a Doge training class. I believe it's after a Republican meeting in the church that day, and so I look forward to seeing you there, and we have a lot to go over. If you happen to be out in Spokane, that Thursday, the 22nd, I will be speaking at the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights Spokane chapter. It starts around 5:30. I actually didn't write down the venue there, but look up CAPR, C-A-P-R, Spokane, and you'll see it posted on probably both their website and their Facebook page out there. And then the very next day, for the next 3 days, I'm going to be out in Ocean Shores, along with many of you, I hope, going to the Roanoke Conference Center. It's one of the largest conservative Republican gatherings that has been going on for quite some time in Washington State. Started back in 2011, I believe, was the first one that we had. I'm actually still on the board on that conference right now, and although I've been a terrible board member, and I apologize in advance for all of those of you who are on the Roanoke board, I feel like I've been dropping the ball this year quite a bit, even more than normal. But I will be hauling a heck of a lot of drinks out there to the conference, and I will see you there. This is the opportunity to network with a lot of people from around the state, particularly and it's also an opportunity actually to talk to a lot of representatives, elected officials right in the middle of session. They will be exhausted from their marathon days at the Capitol. They'll probably be there in Ocean Shores. Gives you an opportunity to chat with them. It's at the convention center. Look up the Roanoke Conference online if you haven't registered yet. I don't know if they're entirely sold out, but they usually are sold out. There's usually about 650 people there. It is the full weekend, lots of activities, after hours, kind of parties where you get a chance to gather with others and chat about how to save the world. And there's a lot of that needed in Washington State. February 11th on Wednesday, I'm going to be at the South Union Grange off of Tilly with the Thurston County Republicans doing a PCO training event that night. It's actually a little bit more about training people to be activists who are already PCOs, giving them ideas of other types of activities that they can do in their community, digging up information about, in this case, I'm focused on Thurston County, so the incompetence and stupidity in their budgeting, where they're wasting your money and making it disappear, opportunities to make improvements in local government, and also teaching people how to do newsletters and podcasts, or just giving them inspiration to get involved in a little bit more activities. Wednesday, the following week, Wednesday, February 18th, I will be at the Women of Washington up in King County speaking at the Medina Golf and Country Club. In fact, I may have to get a suit for that one. And I'll be speaking there on, I believe it's more of State of the State, my perspective as an activist, and hopefully inspiring people to get more engaged and involved in the political process in their own way. It doesn't always mean running for office, but it does mean get involved and engaged. Now, we are right in the middle of the legislative session. It just started 4 days ago. I apologize for not having my live stream at the regular time that I do. Tuesday, I just was out in Spokane doing a presentation out there to the Ponderosa Women's Republican Club. And the night before, which was Monday night, I think I was out there doing I was able to speak at the Northwest Grassroots. Lots of great people. Had a chance to meet and hear from the sheriff in Spokane, who seems to be doing really good work. Met the new prosecutor out there, and just a number of other great activists. And it was really good to see everybody and many fellow patriots fighting the good fight on the other side of the state from the wet side where I sit right now. So with that, I want to just dive into some of these questions because they are piling up. And again, I do try to get to them roughly in the order in which you send them. If I'm missing you, I am not trying to skip over you. Trust me, that just they tend to seem to pile up pretty quickly. So I want to get into some of these questions. Let's see. The first question, I got somebody that put up a bunch of these questions here, and I think they're generally pretty good here. And I will rattle through a couple of these ones first, and then get down to some of the other questions. This was somebody who must have gotten on pretty early on the chat here, and this is Now Then One, and this is sanctuary city or state supports illegal activity just by being supportive of. Well, basically, sanctuary state basically means that you're supporting illegal criminals. You're refusing to let ICE deport them after they create mayhem and destruction in your community and they're in prison. And instead of letting ICE get them in a safe, controlled environment to deport them out of your community, you release them back out of the community to create more victims. And that is one of the reasons why sanctuary state policies are so destructive. They also tend to mean that you're not going to enforce the immigration laws when it comes to employment issues or anything else that you do. It also encourages fraud in the social programs that you have in your community. There are a lot of problems there. And then the second question that Now Then One had was, do you trust sanctuary city or state to represent American values? The answer to that is absolutely not. The next question is your opinion on sanctuary unions like the Teamsters. Does it remind you of a social organization? No, what it reminds me of is a political organization. And like most unions, it's been entirely captured by the left, which means that they're really not a union. They don't represent you if you work for them, or if you're in that union as a worker. What they do represent is the political class that they've basically taken all your dues to spend and support and collect, and it represents the political leadership so they can live high in the hog in your union dues and ensure that you get replaced by foreign workers, which seems to be the modern structure of most of these unions today, particularly the ones that exclusively support Democrats. Next one, do you support the Defense Against Social Democracy? I actually don't know what you're talking about with that question. The next question is your opinion on sanctuary being an advocate of progressive political policies. Well, in this case, I'm saying my opinion is that sanctuary Sanctuary state policies generally are structured as a way to create an underclass in the community that will be given the ability to vote, but and the ability to work at much lower wages, the ability to extract resources from the community, and the ability to violate the law with impunity with no consequences. And so in that case, yes, it helps the progressive policies because that seems to be how they like to roll right now. And next question, why, if the governor lied, represented himself to the people, how can he and others still hold power? Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but politicians lie, and they lie all the time. Some of them lie particularly egregiously. Governor Ferguson would probably be in that camp from my perspective. And as a pathological liar, it's very difficult for them just to not be allowed to hold power just because they lie. The other problem, of course, is that lying is, in some cases, in the eye of the beholder to some extent. If you're a Democrat, you enjoy it when Democrats lie. If you're a Republican, you're going to probably give a pass sometimes to Republicans who aren't as truthful. But lying is not actually, there's been multiple state Supreme Court cases that have said basically lying is free speech, especially for politicians. It isn't free speech for you and I if we decide to lie in a form that we fill out for the government. It just is for the political class. And so they're going to be able to hold power unless you take active steps to remove them, like a recall election or like maybe shock of all shocks. Spend some time, years in advance, recruiting and planning to help good people replace the corrupt and bad politicians that are in office in many of these places. And then here's the last question in this sequence here. Now then one, you're the number one questioner, I think, on the live stream today. Is it not our responsibility to defend liberty, a freedom from captivity, imprisonment, slavery, or despotic control? Yes, it is, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can sit back and hope somebody else does it for you, or you can get involved and engaged and stand up and do it yourself. Being involved and engaged in the political process is a good move. Honestly, most of the problems that we see today have been things that have built up substantially over time that previous generations either kind of gave them a pass, let them get away with it for a while, and then eventually what happens is it builds up into an issue that becomes much more dramatic and problematic the way we see it today. And so obviously if people in previous generations had nipped some of this in the bud, we probably wouldn't be in the problem have the same problems anyway that we see today. So that's why I think it's kind of important to engage now and recognize that if we don't, then we will. It's not going to get better. It won't get better on its own. You can't run away from this. You can try. You might buy yourself a couple years, but essentially everything that we see going on in Washington State and Seattle and California has already been exported into Texas and Florida and Nebraska and Wyoming and Idaho and North Dakota. It's in their cities already. Most of these programs that we recognize as being corrupt, they might change the names. They might try to pretend it's something else, but bad ideas, socialism, and the policies the Democrat Party pushes, they spread like a disease. It's already there. You can go downtown in Boise or Missoula or Bozeman or Billings or Laramie. You will see a lot of the same bad importation of drug addicts and illegals coming in, setting up homeless industrial operations downtown. Sometimes they call it churches or compassion there, but the reality, it's the same kind of problems that we see here. And once you do that, it tends to spread. So we just need to recognize the importance of stopping this and defeating it now, because if you don't, it will spread. And that is the call to action, I think, in a nutshell, moving forward. Let's get down to some other people. Let's see. I'm not sure. I'm bouncing past because people are making some great comments, but okay, here's a good question. HOX9RM. Is there anything that we can do to get rid of the rhinos? I just read that only one Doge cut took place. No wonder Elon was so angry. Well, number one, whatever you read that was not true. So there were a lot of Doge cuts that took place at the federal level. Substantial cuts, billions of dollars of cuts, frequently and consistently. Now, is it enough? A couple hundred $1 billion, even in D.C., that's real money, but making those cuts, I find those to be useful. It is the first time since you've been alive and since I've been alive that anybody's ever bothered to go into government and start looking at it. And of course, the corruption in government, which oftentimes will include some elected Republicans. It includes every single Democrat that's been elected to office, but it'll also include some Republicans for sure who have their own grifting operations and they don't want them shut down. But it also, one of the challenges, I think, is that Elon was moving faster than some of these people were able to keep up, frankly. And he also could only stay there for a certain period of time, if you understand how some of the rules work on what they have to do when they're working in these capacities. And so getting this launched was actually a useful project for us. Getting it up to speed to do a lot more, as the interview with Scott Bessent really indicates. I think they're getting ready to cut off a lot more of the fraud coming to states like Washington and Minnesota. And these are important steps, and essentially they're an outgrowth of Doge. But yes, Elon would be angry if I'd be angry if I was in his shoes too. But at least we're starting to make progress doing this, or at least making the attempt to do it. Whereas in the past, certainly nothing like that was ever done under the Bush administrations ever. The Reagan administration did try it in the early 80s. If you read some of the stories that came out of that, there was some effort to do it. Most of them got side railed because they just weren't aware or familiar with how corrupt government actually is. And it's a lot more than the politicians. It's the bureaucracy. It's these NGOs. It's all this outside flock of just corruption, just an ocean. I remember many of you know I define government as mountains of corruption that are concealed by an ocean of incompetence. You have to go down through the incompetence to find the corruption, but there's plenty of it there. It doesn't mean there aren't some fish in the sea doing good things. There are, but the number one defense for the corrupt is just that they're not corrupt, they're incompetent. We see that defense being used right now today at DCYF, which is one of the leading fraud operations in Washington state. And they're going to basically say, no, we're not corrupt. We don't have fraud at DCYF with all these Somali daycare centers that don't exist that we've given hundreds of thousands of dollars to, millions of dollars to. That's not corruption. That's just our own incompetence, not being able to figure out what's going on after we give them that money. Something along those lines. That's basically it. Here's the thing. When somebody asks me this, getting rid of the rhinos, sure, we absolutely should be getting rid of people that stand in the way of fixing government, but spend at least 10% of your time getting rid of the people who promote all the corruption that's there. And that's a lot more than just people that are on the Republican side of it. Absolutely. There are people stabbing each other in the back on the conservative side of the political spectrum. Absolutely. And trust me, I run into these problems myself in these fights sometimes as well. But what I find is that people who obsessively only focus on that are people that are either afraid or not aware of where the real corruption comes from. It's the other side, and that's where should be putting more of our energy. Some of the cleaning up on our side does come with that as we get into it a little bit more. Author essays, Stacy, I think I know who you are since I think we spoke earlier today. Do you think the recent Supreme Court decision on limiting election counting results to the election day will be true here come November? Okay, for clarity, this Supreme Court decision, I know which one you're referring to right now. What the Supreme Court decided is they let a Republican candidate for office challenge the validity of an election result based on the fact that in that state, now I'm blanking on whether it was Illinois or where it was from. I thought it was Illinois, but maybe I'm wrong. Whether they had standing to sue over the fact that the auditors or the equivalent of the auditors in that state were counting votes after Election Day, counting ballots after Election Day. In most states, Election Day actually means what it says. It's Election Day and the election ends that day. Obviously, in Washington, we're election multi-month, and it's one of the garbage elements of our election process here that needs to be reformed and eliminated. And the Supreme Court didn't say that you can't limit the votes to only on Election Day, but they did allow him to challenge it, have standing to challenge this based on that. So the bigger case that is going to decide this question probably before this guy gets back up to the Supreme Court in his challenge is actually the case, I thought it was out of Mississippi, that the Supreme Court agreed to hear, and that it's going to be decided this summer. And it's going to decide whether it's legal for auditors or secretaries of state in various states to allow counting after Election Day. if that's the case, it doesn't end mail-in voting, but it does reform things a bit and brings us back to more of the original Oregon model, which was that I said the original, not what they're doing now, but what they started out with, which is that, okay, if you're going to mail in ballots, that's fine, but you have to have them arrive by election day. If they don't, they're considered invalid by the fact that they haven't arrived. So forget the games with postmarks or secret sauce, applesauce stashes of ballots in the trunks of election worker cars like they like to do in King County here, or the various other problems that we've uncovered over the years with mail-in voting system. Again, not a perfect solution, but a step in the right direction. And it does look like the Supreme Court is probably leaning towards that kind of a decision. I think that's possible. And if they do come up with that decision, that is going to be done in time to make an impact on Washington state elections. But essentially all it's going to do is it's going to shift the counting. And this came up in one of the videos I did a while ago, but it's going to shift the fact that election day means election day. You can't just keep counting for months and months until you get to whatever the desired outcome was that you wanted, which is the approach that Washington, California, Oregon, New York, Colorado, Arizona, all these other places actually do. Let's see. Going down past this, here's a question from Clary Vald 8385. By the way, that was a good question from Stacy back there. So Clary Vald 8385 had a question here on 5974. It's going to be Senate Bill 5974. It was mentioned that elected sheriffs would be replaced with appointees, but like the millionaire taxes wording, could Washington State Patrol leadership be changed in a similar rug pull? Actually, what I believe 5974 does is it allows elected sheriffs to be replaced under some circumstances with appointees. It doesn't automatically replace all sheriffs. Listen, it's a bad bill, and you should vote no on it. I had a long conversation with the Spokane County Sheriff about this issue just a couple days ago while I was out in Spokane. He opposes it, as do, I think, pretty much every sheriff in Washington state, except for the appointed sheriff probably in King County. But it's a terrible bill. Of course, there's all kinds of problems with it. But I will point out, though, because you brought up the State Patrol in that question, the State Patrol leadership is already appointed by the governor, and so that doesn't really change anything with the State Patrol. They aren't elected positions. Same person here, Claire V. Vald, 8385. Question, perhaps Washington sheriffs should assemble a policeman's ball at Olympia to get the message out that 5974 means law enforcement jobs are not protected and neither are citizens. Well, actually, it's less about whether law enforcement jobs are protected than whether the voters have a voice in determining who's going to be in charge of police in their community. You've already lost that voice in the cities where police chiefs are appointed by your elected officials, but sheriffs are still directly elected in 38 of the 39 counties right now, King County being the exception. I will point out that King County had been an elected sheriff up until 1969. Then they made an appointed sheriff for about 20 years. Then they went back to being an elected sheriff, and now they've gone back to being an appointed sheriff. And the reason why that variation exists in King County is because it's one of 7 counties that have gone down the home rule charter process. In 1946, they made an amendment to the state constitution in Washington that allowed counties to go down the home rule charter process. King County, of course, was the first, followed by, I believe, Pierce, Snohomish, Whatcom, and Clark was the most recent one. You also have Clallam and San Juan County that have done this. Most of the other counties have been smart enough to avoid going down the home rule charter disaster zone. But for the ones that have, it gives them some flexibility about which positions can be elected or appointed. And out of the home rule charter process, you can make sheriffs appointed positions rather than elected. Most of the home rule charter counties have not chosen to go down that road. So it was only King County that's waffled on that a couple times, and right now they're in the bad side of that decision process. This is a way at the state level, the legislators and certainly the governor, probably more than anything else, the last thing they want are sheriffs that are responsive to their own communities. They want to be able to destroy the objective ability of sheriffs to pursue law enforcement practices in that community and put criminals away. And so, for instance, in a sanctuary state jurisdiction, the way that our state has has organized the, Help Washington Work Act, which was, of course, one of the more deceptive titles given to a bill in Olympia recently. It's really the sanctuary state policies for law enforcement that's trying to actually enforce federal immigration law there and make sure that they do get rid of violent criminals in their community. That's really what makes Democrats angry. They'd rather keep those violent criminals in the community so they can create more victims. Interestingly enough, by the way, I will point out that based on the volume of people that have been deported by ICE in Washington state and removed, and a lot of self-deportations on top of that, I believe that there's a direct correlation between that and the drop in the murder rate and other crimes in Washington state. It's a big deal. And please pay attention to that because we have had a crime drop in Washington state. Not as significant generally as it is at the national level, but it's surprise, surprise. I know my Democrat socialist friends or somebody that goes to Evergreen State College may not realize this, but if you actually deport violent criminals, amazingly enough, there's going to be a little bit less violent crime. And I know that's a shock. It's a logic and rhetoric sort of question. But if you ever read James Q. Wilson, any study that's ever been done by anybody who is honest, surprisingly, criminals commit crimes, and they don't restrict themselves to only one category of crime. For the most part, they usually are willing to commit lots of crimes. And when you put bad guys in prison or, for instance, send them to back to Africa or some other country, wherever they came from, they're not able to continue to commit the crimes they were before. And so a lot of crime sprees get derailed because the criminal gets sent out or put away. Totally Together, number one, what can I do to support the federal government's investigation into our voter fraud? Number one, start paying attention to what's going on in your local community. The current fraud case I did a video on a few days ago out of Pasco is one of the tactics that is very easy to do if you have access to the thousands and tens of thousands of loose ballots that tend to get tossed out like confetti at apartment complexes because you have a high turnover of people who live there. And if you have somebody who's corrupt somewhere in that process, doesn't have to be the manager like the Pasco case, and that was just a fourplex. So you had a fourplex manager there that was illegally voting on behalf of other people, and they got caught, and they probably thought they'd never get caught. It's a question about how many times they've been doing it for how many years, but they are being charged with fraud to the great credit of Franklin County because, as a general rule, most of these cases that get referred to law enforcement, they never get prosecuted. They really don't even get investigated seriously because, put yourself in the shoes of law enforcement in most cases. They get a caseload. If you're the detective and it's a choice between removing two child molesters and a rapist from the street and a gangbanger versus finding out if the 17 ballots here that look like they're fraudulent, if, running down the goose chase trying to figure out where it came from and who committed fraud, where are you going to spend your time? And it's pretty logical, and I don't blame them. They're going to spend more of their time looking at the really bad guys to protect kids and women that are being raped. So, however, it doesn't mean that it's not something that needs to be investigated. And this is one of the challenges I think we have, is that it absolutely does make a difference. We have to keep moving on this. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Shul, 60. Actually, this isn't really a question, but you're mentioning here about a 1% reward on recovered funds from the theft fraud, that it would do wonders for the Doge efforts. Yeah, so there's always been this recovery operation that where you could be a whistleblower to recover funds, but most that are stolen in government. And you can become wealthy doing that, but mostly the way they write that up is it's when those funds are recovered. And most of the time it's going to be if the one guy I knew that made a bunch of money on it was a medical device fraud, where they were basically committing artificial billing increases and colluding together with other companies to overbill. I want to say it was Medicare. It could have been both Medicaid and Medicare, but it was definitely Medicare. And it ended up being he got like $19 million as part of that settlement. It took him like 8 years to do the investigation. But the thing is, you have companies there that are paying back the federal government, and so it's a percentage of the fine that goes to that person. This was 25 years ago, I think, when I had met this guy. And he was in King County, and I think he was a medical device salesman, and he was the one who kind of uncovered it. That type of reward exists. It doesn't tend to exist for government employees because it obviously creates the potential incentive for them to facilitate fraud. And then, of course, expose it and get the bonus, right? So there's all kinds of ways to scam the system. But generally, it might have some kind of an impact. I don't totally disagree with that. I just don't know how you would be able to totally implement that or how totally make that work. I don't think that's as easy as it sounds, and I don't think it's as simple as it sounds. All right, let's get into this next question. I'm going to find the question because there's a lot of comments here, but not as much on the question front. So let me see if I can get these back here. A lot of questions today. I like that and appreciate it. I have to tell you, I was kind of getting stressed that I was going to have all kinds of problems with my live stream today, and I was having some technical problems early on. I think I figured it out, and I hope I don't have that again. But I was swapping stream keys and all kinds of things. So anybody out there who's ever done this before, you know what I'm talking about. Kathleen, 253. My cousins should be there at Ocean Shores. That's good. Have them come up and meet me. Ocean Shores is at the Roanoke Conference. It's an easy opportunity to meet other people in person. Have them come up, say hi, and have them tell me that they're your cousin. I always like it when people do that, and it's always fun to meet new people anyway. And yes, I see a bunch of people here reporting from their bunker in Washington State. Everyone needs one. Gary Edwards, 3269. In order to get rid of the money problem that plagues the initiative process, paying for signature gathering, shouldn't every county have initiative centers where people can go sign, I assume? Yeah, I mean, listen, nobody should be wanting to create an infrastructure that doesn't exist now already. Like, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that people you're never going to get rid of money from the initiative process. That's a pipe dream delusion. That's dishonest and really not realistic. There is going to be money there. What's happened is the left doesn't like the initiative process when they're in control because, of course, it challenges their unipower over all levers of governance. The reason why the initiative process was pushed so strongly by activists in Washington State back in 1912, and really had been on their efforts to put it on to get it into the state constitution. It started back in the 1890s. We were one of the first states that did it. But a lot of it was about the recognition that once elected officials get into office, at times they get into groupthink mentality. They're in a bubble. They're totally disconnected from their constituents. They're influenced by lobbyists and outside special interests and the bureaucracy, and they don't prioritize the people's priorities who sent them to Olympia. And so the objective at the time was to at least provide an outlet so that the public could respond when it looked like special interests had begun to dominate too much on a given issue. And generally, that is how the initiative process has proceeded. What I think right now the left is so angry about is that Brian Haywood has become probably one of the more efficient guys as a business person who's figured out how to run the initiatives also a lot cheaper and cut most of the consultant class out of the mix in getting these initiatives across the board, which means he's able to do it a lot cheaper than an average leftist operation that wants to come to the state and collect signatures themselves. And so that's another thing that they've been angry about. There were several failed initiatives before Brian kind of honed his Let's Go Washington operation. And now they're mad because he can do more than one initiative at a time, challenging them on keeping boys out of girls' sports or trying to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, whatever it is. And that's the last thing they want. So anyway, we'll see. Let's go down here. I see people watching the show from San Diego. I always wonder how many people I have from California watching the show. Let me know where you're actually watching from in the comment section down below. And it's always interesting. Most people, usually it's about 59% of my viewership, not a surprise, watch this show from Washington State. A lot of you are expats who have lived in Washington State, moved somewhere else. And some of you are living in Idaho and North Dakota, based on when I look at some of the Google Analytics data, or Texas, and you're wondering what your state's going to look like in 10 years. So you're watching this channel and wondering how you can stop it from happening where you live. And so hopefully you're learning a few tips and tricks to prevent it from getting on there. The next question here is Alien Paul 9999. Is there any chance to recall Ferguson and Brown due to their incompetence? I'm assuming you didn't spell it correctly, but I'm assuming that's what you mean is incompetence. No, actually, incompetence is not a statutorily allowed process for the recall process. You can run a recall against people in Washington state, elected officials in Washington state, for malfeasance, misfeasance, and also violating their oath of office. Although I have to tell you, I've never seen an oath of office recall ever go anywhere. But because the recall process in our state requires you to go before judges, the judges are going to have to approve it. The judges will give Democrat to pass most of the time. I mean, every now and then they'll approve something and let you shake the tree on a Democrat. Most of the time, though, they're not going to approve recall efforts against Democrats. But if you do decide that you want to do a recall effort against a Democrat politician, I do recommend that you go back and you find the draft of the recall petition that was filed against Kshama Sawant, because that was drafted by Democrat attorneys and it was approved by the Supreme Court and it was upheld, and it was clearly a leftist that they were going after. And even though they theoretically failed in that effort, they did make her have to go to the ballot one more time. And so, God gave eyes to plagiarize on this stuff a little bit when it comes to how to draft a recall petition. One of the biggest problems is that most of the people who think they're going to go down the recall process either think it's California, which it's not. It's a lot more difficult here to run a recall than it is in California, or certainly to get it on the ballot. But secondly, there's a lot less experience in successfully getting it processed to that point. And so a lot of these draft recall petitions are terrible, and they're done poorly, designed to fail. And even when they're done really well, I think it's really difficult. So the recall process, you could put the same amount of work, less work actually, into just simply recruiting and preparing and supporting a good candidate to run against them. After all, either way, it's going to the ballot. So give yourself a chance with somebody that could replace the incompetent clown that's in there right now. And I don't mean to insult clowns when I compare our Attorney General, Nick Brown, or our governor to clowns, because obviously clowns have a place in society, and these guys just act like it once they get into elected office. Jason Fisher, 1530. Hey, Glenn, sideshow. Bob's speech is good to play if you have trouble sleeping at night. And what do you think of it? Actually, I haven't seen his speech. I heard about it, so I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to watch. And life of an activist kind of thing here. I have been bouncing around the state quite a bit lately. Like I said, I had multiple meetings and events that I did out in Spokane. I was out filming till really early in the morning on Sunday night. One of those times I actually slept in my car as I'm driving around the state. Sometimes you're just running and gunning, right? Just getting stuff done. And so when I'm doing something like that, I don't always have time to stay completely up on stuff. I'm hoping to catch up on it quite a bit tomorrow, but I did hear about it. Honestly, Brandy Cruz, I think, has been doing some really good reporting from Olympia on what's going on down there. Jonathan Cho's done some really good stuff, too, as well. You're seeing Ari Hoffman and Jason Rance in Center Square kind of get on top of it as well. All these guys are good sources, and that's where I would go to find out what's going on in Olympia. Let's see. Here's the next question. LT Razor. If Ferguson didn't sign his oath of office within the required 30 days of taking office, why can't we hold him in contempt of office? Well, you can try. Again, Washington State's not the same as California. And we also have judges in our state that tend to throw things out if it has the potential to impact the Democrat constituencies. Our state Supreme Court is entirely corrupt and absolutely to the core, without exception. Every judge on the Supreme Court they are dishonest. They have been politically corrupted. Their decisions can never be trusted, and you'll never get the truth. And you'll certainly not have them pay any attention to what the Constitution says when a case goes before them. That by itself is actually pretty scary. Unfortunately, below them, the appellate court level judges have been all pretty much purged. They're at about that same level. There are a few decent Superior Court judges here and there around the state. Not that many, but there are some. Most of them are also into this DEI, corrupt, hive mind mindset when it comes to leftist political policies, which is why you should be afraid when you go to court, because these judges will simply invent law knowing that their fictional imagination, that every rational person that's ever read the law and looked at case history would tell you is wrong. They'll just give a special exception to you. I've been there. I know. I've been in court. There's a lot of dishonest judiciary in our state, and there's just quite a bit about them. Mama Fisk at We the Govern. Is there another way to get a hold of you? I'm in Spokane and I want to see about a Doge training class. My emails have gone to your spam. Okay. I don't know why they would have gone to spam. I'll have to look at that. But yes, actually Spokane, I am planning to do a Doge Washington training class. Grassroots Northwest, that group out there will probably take point on organizing the location and date. So I recommend you reach out to them and just make sure you're on their list, because once we set that down, we'll go out there. I don't always advertise all the Doge training classes because most of them are local groups of people. They get people organized. In the beginning of the show, I reference a few coming up, but mostly local groups are organized. They have their group of people they want to make sure they bring to the class. I want to make sure I train them. If the venue's large enough, then we can bring in more people, because I'm always about trying to teach more people how to find fraud, waste, and abuse in government. But your best bet would be to reach out to them and ask them to have me out there. So Grassroots Northwest in Spokane, they have a website, easy to reach. Might be easier to reach than I am. Honestly, and I have to tell you this right now, I've been so overwhelmed with whistleblower data lately that it's completely overwhelming. I'm way behind in getting back to people. I'm setting up some more teams of people to help with just reviewing and vetting. A lot of stuff I get from whistleblowers is not real, or it's it's not very well vetted or organized, or it's structured in a way that's difficult to sort through. But there's also a lot of important stuff there, and I try to get to all of it. But I have to tell you, especially since the Nick Shirley video came out, it's just been overwhelming. So I'm kind of restructuring to have a lot more people involved in the review process in a way that's more systematic and that we can do a lot more volume. Let's see. Here's a question from Gary Edwards, 3269 again. And by the way, the reason why it didn't pop out there is there was a space between the governed. So it has to be at We the Governed, no spaces, more likely for me to see it. Housing first, yes or no, and why? No, and I'll tell you why. No, because it's a shockingly dishonest operation that's designed mostly for subsidized basically corrupt housing that they bribe or overpay building garbage housing that they don't plan on really running like a real housing operation. It's the most expensive housing you can find in Washington State. It's a scam. It's just a way of grifting a lot of money from the taxpayers to do something that you could do in the private sector a lot cheaper, more efficiently, and a higher quality, and basically produce totally just create this money pit for the taxpayers that they're stuck on for a long time moving forward. And it is a disaster. People should have the right to, and it's not really a right so much, they have the ability that if they make enough money and they have the opportunity, I want most people to become homeowners. But our state has implemented a sequence of policies. Growth Management Act is a big part of it. Absurd and ridiculous rules that have no attachment to reality, safety, or any kind of intelligence. And sometimes they actually downgrade and make much lower quality buildings, attempting to follow the stupid rules the county or the Building Code Association or whatever pushes. And what they've done is they've artificially inflated the cost of housing. The average house in King County, I believe it's still about $250,000 of that is simply a cost that's the cost of government. It's pure government abuse and grifting that goes into the cost of that house. And that's a massive amount of money for any normal person to absorb before they can even get started. So anyway, that's an issue. So I'm not a fan of the housing first model, which the other thing that they're using this for is a way to disguise the drug addiction and the mental health crisis and problems that they have in these communities. And so what they really want to do is have the drug addicts not be so visible so that you and I can run around and take pictures of them and videos of how rundown Seattle is. They'd rather stick them in squalor inside these tenement sort of projects so that they can be victimized in there and they can die out of the public eye, and they can burn them down and they can poison each other and assault each other without as much visibility from the public. Meanwhile, whoever owns that housing or got paid to supposedly put it up there, they get to make bank and on the backs of the taxpayers. And I'm not a fan of that. McKinney in Klickitat County. This is a comment more than it is a question because I don't know how to answer that. Dan Woolett, 5649. Thanks for commenting, Dan. Don't think that's a question, but I'll keep jumping down. Next question here. TZ Burton, thanks for jumping on the show again today. And again, guys, I'm sorry this is a Thursday, not a Tuesday. Given the chance, I will always try to do these on Tuesdays. The problem I'm having right now is I had a couple conflicts, and I do have another conflict next Tuesday. My plan is to do a live stream on Wednesday. No, it isn't. My plan is to do a live stream on Monday next week because I can't get. I'm got another event on Wednesday. So anyway, one of those times, lots of busyness. Let's see. Conservative ladies of Washington cover parental rights issues mostly. What are your thoughts on digital IDs for age verification? Do you think this is a backdoor into forced digital ID? And this is T.T. Burton's question. Actually, conservative ladies of Washington. Well, actually, sorry. And I'm going to go back because I mentioned that I'm speaking at the Women of Washington event on February 18th in the evening at the Medina Golf and Country Club. And so for some reason I was kind of juxtaposing that group since I'd brought it up earlier is where I was speaking. The Conservative Ladies of Washington, they do cover mostly parental issues. They've done a great job covering a lot of issues in Washington State. And you're asking me my thoughts on digital IDs. I am not a fan of digital IDs generally. And yes, I don't want to have forced digital ID. I am not a big fan of big government. I'm not a big fan of Big Brother. I don't like the surveillance state. I'd like to get away from that direction in our society, looking at what's going on in England and some of these other places around the world. And technology has made it so much easier to get there now. And I greatly fear my civil libertarian side of me is always resistant to some of these efforts. It's made particularly more problematic when there's legitimate reasons to crack down on things like illegal immigration and importation of millions of military-age people that have been brought across the border and illegally distributed throughout the country. You don't know who they are, no backgrounds, no idea what's going on. That is not how actual real immigration works in a real country, particularly when many of them are brought over either by, they appear to be flown over by their host countries or their home countries, or they are involved with NGOs trying to shove them into the country for their own nefarious reasons. So anyway, we'll see what happens. T.T. Burton, second question here. When will Harmeet Dillon follow through on her comments of going after Captain America, Steve Hobbs, and voter rolls? Well, she's in court with them right now. The motion practice is ongoing. Washington State is in court at this time because Harmeet Dillon is suing Steve Hobbs. So that's the path they're on right now. Now, the bonus that we have is as we get out there and expose more vote fraud and other problems that Captain America, Steve Hobbs, pretends isn't happening. Now, each time, I mean, this is a very predictable, just in case you haven't noticed this with government before, but this is how it works. So first they deny anything's going on. They deny it. No, nothing's happening. There's no Somali fraud here. DCYF just did this and they're here. There's no fraud, which is kind of funny, of course, but nevertheless, that's their first step. Every single time that we've uncovered fraud or corruption in government, that is the first defense they always come out. They gaslight you and try to pretend that there's nothing to see here. No, nothing to see here. Even though at the same time, even our marginally competent and completely joke audit of DCYF clearly identified $475 million that, who knows where it went, right? No clarity, but that's a totally different thing, right? And so what'll happen is that we'll have more stories that'll come out clearly identifying all these fake entities that got money and disappeared. Nobody knows where they went. The people that I'm getting whistleblowers on about this so-called daycare center that was next to their house had a sign out front for years and no kids, no adults, no cars even. Nothing was really going on there. Right after the Nick Shirley video comes out, suddenly there's a U-Haul and they're cleaning the place out and it disappears. Groups like, there's plenty of examples like that. And that's what DCYF says is perfectly normal and that's what they want to support and waste your tax dollars on. And by the way, I'm going to clarify here on this one because the DCYF cash they're talking about under the distribution of the daycare fraud, or I'm sorry, daycare center money. Essentially what it is it's not 100% federal or state program. It's about 60% feds on the program itself, and then the other 40% the state covers. I believe the administrative costs at DCYF are entirely borne by the state. And so it's kind of this mixed hybrid of cash dollars. Now, that's true, actually, with almost all these programs that we're discussing. Each one has a different mix that the federal government and the state government kind of have to put their part in. SNAP benefits, which are basically the food stamps, for example, that's 100% on the benefit side is paid by the feds. On the administrative side, which means the DSHS employees that are involved in rubber stamping your false ID and fake names to give you those cards, half of their cost is paid by the feds and half of it's paid by the state. I believe they just changed that in the recent federal bill, so it's gone to 60-40, where it's instead of 50-50 on the administrative costs. So I think that the state now has to absorb 60% of that cost. But all these programs have some kind of a mixed percentage they kick out there. And so I don't know why I went off on that segment, but it's worth just being aware of it. Because as we dig into this, the federal government has jurisdiction and automatically has investigative authority and ability to dig into any program in which there's a nexus of federal funds that are involved. And so that's true in any program in Washington state. If there's federal funds of any kind that get into there and bleed into the program somewhere, then the feds have the right to come in and look at it from an auditing or a sanctioning or an investigation thing. They don't need anybody's permission. On programs that are entirely run by the state of Washington, that there's not a dime of federal funding, or it's just the state and county, that you do have programs like this that are out there. Plenty of wasteful, disastrous programs that they run as well. The feds' only opportunity really to look at that type of fraud that might be going on in that kind of environment or misuse of funds is if it appears that more than $5,000, I believe that's the statutory limit there, has been stolen or disappeared, or that's what they're talking about. Now, to be honest, the feds are not going to generally want to spend their time looking at a $5,000 theft of money out of some county program or a state program. There are legions of examples of that happening pretty much every day. While we're watching this video, I'm sure it's happened another couple dozen times somewhere. That's not the kind of money they want to investigate. Most likely the feds wouldn't want to waste their time unless they felt like they had at least, say, 100,000 or more, I would guess. That's probably the threshold that would interest them to be involved or engaged. And judging from some of the federal settlements where people have pled out on some of the fraud investigations in the state of Washington, $1 million seems to be kind of this round number that they generally are looking for. Anyway, that's how it works, and I don't know if that helps anybody watching the show. Going down to the next question. This is from Lindsay7543. Took your advice and showed up for the Keeping Kids Safe rally in Olympia, and even went to my rep's office and spoke to the staff about changes needed to the Keeping Families Together Act. Well, thank you so much for doing that. It does matter. It all adds up. And, there's a certain amount of there's always this enthusiasm sort of quotient that occurs with people who are involved in the political process. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the politicians and the elected officials, they absolutely do look at their comments on bills. They look at the phone calls that they get. They look at emails they get. They look at a lot of information to try to get a sense of which way the wind's blowing. The one thing to remember about some of these politicians is that even the corrupt ones generally didn't go there to probably deal with most of the issues that come across their desk during a legislative session. There's roughly 3,000 bills, give or take, that are usually proposed in any given legislative session. The long session's the one we had last year in 2025. That's your 90-day session. So they keep those bills alive into the next session, which is a short session right now. But you're going to see 3,000 bills proposed. You're going to see in the end about 500 of them, maybe that many anyway, actually coming out and becoming law, or at least landing on the desk of the governor's office. Of those bills, those 500, really 90% of them tend to not be controversial or big deals. Some of them are just fixing the regular stupidity and incompetence of previous administrations or bureaucracies where they just had to do some tweak to, that clean up a law that was poorly written or unintended consequences or something odd, or naming a a building after somebody or a trail. I mean, minor stuff that's really not that controversial. And that really is what they end up voting on. Those are the things you don't see the hearings, or, I mean, they have hearings on them, but they don't tend to hear a lot of drama. Nobody signs in one way or the other on the bill. It tends to just go through pretty quietly. And then you get the bigger bills where there is a lot of controversy, and those are the ones you're hearing right now on some of the stuff. So there's a lot more to expose in the state, and I'm going to get to that here pretty quick, but we do see a lot of issues going on out there. Moving forward here. Sorry, I'm going to see, where am I at here? Okay, there's that one. What are the voter rolls not being scrutinized? Oh, this is a question from Mike Pallister, 3037. Sorry, I didn't see your question. Just didn't have the with the government in front of it. What are the voter rolls not being scrutinized? I'm assuming you say why. And the voter rolls are not being scrutinized because the last thing anybody at the Secretary of State's office, or pretty much in most of government, the last thing they want to do is find problems on the voter rolls. And so they don't want the feds to be able to look at it and identify all the non-U.S. citizens that are registered to vote, which we do register almost all of them to vote here in our state. They don't want things to expose, they don't want situations that expose incompetence, stupidity, or corruption in the system. And so they'd prefer if nobody look at it and just pretend like all is well. That's what they'd prefer. And the reason why is it makes them look bad, right, when you uncover bad things. They certainly do purge voter rolls somewhat every year or so, but there's also a totally separate story about what they call inactive voters, because they aren't really being purged. They're just sitting in this ghost-like status that dishonest operations can pull them out and make them live votes later. Totally separate question that we can talk about at a different time. Let's see. Liberals. Oh, this is funny. Army wife, Seattle, 1776. Liberals in the comments on the Pasco thing said, see, only one was counted, so our system is safe. Actually, I don't think that's true. In that case, I think 3 of those ballots were counted. One was rejected, right? They definitely rejected the one. But by the time they figured out what was going on in the investigation with the other 3, those had already been counted and accepted votes. So actually, I don't think those comments are correct at all. I'll go back and look at it and make sure I'm not missing something there. But I'm pretty sure that that's not an accurate assessment. Let's see. Go on down here looking for questions. Yeah, go Seahawks. Yep, I'm hearing that about it. Keep going down here. Sorry, Glenn, you're stuck with us. T.T. Burton. I'm very happy to be working in Washington State that I love, with all my family that live here, and all the future potential that we have. As bad and as incompetent and corrupt as our political class is, and as stupid and disastrous as a bureaucracy that they support and bloat in our state, the state has a lot of potential, an incredible amount of potential and opportunity moving forward. And it's amazing how much things can change when you remove bad people from office. And it's amazing how much they can hurt you when they get in there. And it's an important lesson to learn. Unfortunately, I wish my friends in red states weren't going to be learning it the hard way themselves. And I'd like them to stop going down the road to where we are, which they are all seeming to be on it right now. T.Z. Burton, Washington State imposed a capital gains tax in 2021. I see the 9-0 Democrat Supreme Court upholding a millionaire's tax. Yes, I think they would too. My question is, when will that tax be lowered to get more people? And the answer to that question is immediately. But the reality is, let's just say they do get it there. This is the quote unquote millionaire's tax. Let's just say they propose one. And so it goes up. You're going to be looking at about 3 years from now, probably, when it gets implemented. Maybe 2 at the most, but probably 3, just judging from it. And that's assuming that there isn't a big cascade of other issues that come up. Anyway, so TZ Burton, looks like you're down in California this month. I hope you're enjoying the weather down there. LT Razor, you skipped both my questions. I don't think so. We'll try to do at We the Govern so I can see your questions, but I don't think I did. So if your question's been skipped, I have not purposely skipped it. So let's see. My volume keeps fluctuating a little. Well, I don't see that on the soundboard here, so we'll see. Let's see. Keep going down here. Somebody's arguing about whether I skipped questions or not. I don't think I did. Somebody else says I didn't. I don't know. I don't think so. If I did, I didn't do it on purpose. Mama Fisk at We the Govern, thank you for doing this later. Will this time be the norm going forward? 6 o'clock is the time I try to do my live streams. I'm alone in the studio, so I'm kind of doing this by myself. And which is good in the sense I'm not in conflict with other people who also use a studio space. But so it's a good time for me to be doing live streams. The question is the day. I prefer to do these on Tuesdays. I'm just trying to do that for like some kind of continuity reasons, so people have some level of predictability. What throws me off is when I'm stuck doing an event somewhere that's in direct conflict with it, and I need to do these events sometimes. And so when that happens, then I try to reschedule the live stream to the Monday or the Wednesday. Next week, I'm likely to do a live stream on Monday. So it'll be just like this, only over the weekend, and we'll have a lot more to talk about. And I got a couple more videos I'm trying to film tonight. So we'll see if I'm able to do that and get my act together. But anyway, there's a lot going on. Oh, I know what you're saying there. Sorry, McKinney. Going back to this question, McKinney in Central Washington. You're talking about the other person who's decided to declare for the congressional seat. There's more than one Republican. You know what? That's a good. Thank you for bringing that up. And I have to go back and talk about that because Newhouse decided to step down, and she is a person, I believe, who's been endorsed by Newhouse at this point in time. Jared Sessler, who had run against Newhouse last time, is still in the office at least, and and so you got multiple Republicans, and so we should talk about that race and how things probably operate there. And let's keep going down here, and some of the questions. Here's the question from Jason Fisher, 1530. Why is the I-5 bridge over budget, and will we see it built anytime soon? I'm assuming you're talking about the Columbia River Bridge, I-5 bridge, and it's over budget because there is no functional time I've ever seen in Washington State in modern times where they build anything on budget or on time. They always go over budget. Mostly that one's over budget because of everyone that needs to be paid off along the way, and it's just become the great grift. I think these guys have kind of figured out that it's actually you make more money not building anything than getting anything going. And so they find all kinds of ways to ensure that nothing happens, and pushing stupid, dumb ideas like the light rail over the bridge is a good way to ensure that it all gets bogged down. What do the consultants, the people who are involved, really care? They get paid no matter what. So you have more and more millions of dollars disappearing into the rat hole of the Columbia River Crossing Bridge, ghost of the Columbia River Crossing Bridge, the CRC, which was killed last time through the same kind of incompetence, corruption, and stupidity. So I think there's a lot of stuff to look at in that area. The next question down here is from Stool 60 or 6Q. I think it's 60 there. Will the government funding cuts to sanctuary city states affect my senior citizen benefits, Social Security and Medicaid? No. Medicare, I think you mean Social Security and Medicare. Medicaid, it might affect, just because of all the fraud that Washington State's allowed. Probably not Medicare, though. Medicare would probably be relatively untouched, even though we know there's fraud that goes on there. They're probably going to have to start just digging in and figuring out which programs they cut or don't cut. I mean, it's a lot. I think people have no idea this true scope and size of the fraud and the spectrum of the fraud, like how many different programs are involved in this fraud, and the size of it is unbelievable. And I don't think anybody's even paid much attention to that. But I also don't think those cuts, even though they're talking about doing them in February, I'll be quite impressed if the feds stick to their guns and actually do it. And that because you're going to have lefty judges that'll say no, and then it has to go up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ultimately has to make a decision. It seems absurd on its face that he can't cut it, but it's important to do it, and then I guess trigger the legal system so it gets going. I wish they'd done it a year ago. What's it take to hold these state employees who are responsible for overseeing these benefit programs to make them be held accountable, is I assume what you mean. And this question is from James Jim Nozell. You never see them getting sentenced severely. What sentences is Minnesota giving? Good question. To my knowledge, I have not seen any employees in Minnesota held accountable at any point in time in the process during the various criminal cases and investigations that have gone on there. Now, remember, in Minnesota, people have gone to prison. Not enough of them, but some of them have. The state employees that, because this is one thing to remember about DCYF with the daycare fraud, the only way that daycare fraud or any of this fraud from DCYF can exist to the scope and size that it does is because of direct involvement and willful negligence, at best willful negligence, but mostly collusion of the bureaucrats that have supposedly administered those agencies. There is no other way. You would not have fraud at this scale, not even close to it, if it wasn't for their willingness to, now maybe they're on the take, maybe politically they're aligned, so they want to look the other way, maybe they've been told to look the other way. The exact reasoning and specific nature behind it. Because remember, perfect defense for a bureaucrat in most cases is to come forward and say, listen, I am not corrupt. I'm not a crook. I'm just an incompetent buffoon. And people say, gosh, I've dealt with government a lot. I know that most people who work there are incompetent buffoons. You probably are too. So, wow, that's a pretty good defense. And so it's very believable. This is a very believable defense. And so the level of proof that you have to prove that they're not incompetent clowns, they're totally corrupt criminals, is a much higher lift than just saying they're clowns and incompetent. And so it's one of the number one ways. That's how government kind of is able to kind of continue to bloat and blunder its way forward. If you want to end it, you cut the funding off and you fire everybody. That's pretty much it. There's no way to really reform it for the most part. So I don't think it's very easy to reform, but it does take a lot of work. Somebody's saying that I'm their hero here. Well, I'm nobody's hero, just trying to do my best. There's Jim McPhee, 01S. Can you comment on Senate Bill 5926? And the answer is no, because you're going to tell me more about what it's about. I don't have them all memorized. And so here's the thing. Imagine that you do this year after year, and I've been doing this for a while. What happens is these bill numbers get recycled every couple years. So if you type in SB 5926 and you don't say the year that it's from, for example, you're going to see a bunch of bills come up that have nothing to do with what you think it is. So it's only the bill, that Senate bill this year. And I don't have them all memorized. And so sometimes towards the end, when one has gotten a lot more controversy than another one, I do have it memorized. But you have to add a little bit more context to the bill just because I'm probably not going to know what you're talking about. So sorry, I just don't know off the top of my head what that one is. Let's see. Sending bill comments to the LD5 representatives and senators are a total waste of time. They are Democrat tools. Yes, they are. Do it anyway. Do it just to annoy them. I mean, they hate it when they get people. They want you to stop commenting on it. That's really what they're trying to do. But again, putting those comments in on the bill matters. And it does matter. For people who say it doesn't, that's a shocking level of total ignorance on your part, because I watched a bunch of bills get killed this last session directly as a result of the sheer volume of people who responded in opposition to those bills. So it does work. It doesn't work every single time. It's not universally guaranteed, but it will work many times, especially if it's not a marquee die on the hill, every Democrat has to do it or else they lose campaign services for life type of bill. So let's see. Can the removal, this is a good question, let the galaxy burn 944? That is a great handle for a question on this show. Can the removal of federal funding help fix our voter issues? It's a good question. I don't have an answer to that for sure. I think removal of federal funding helps fix our state, because if you shut down a lot of these grifting operations, the bureaucrats lose their jobs, the NGOs don't. They lose their grifting opportunities. The con artists and scammers don't can't continue to be funded. The campaign contributions that all of them kick up to the Democrats pretty much exclusively, all of that kind of disappears. Is it true that people who might be needy and would benefit from some of that money, that they get cut off too? Absolutely. And that's the price you're going to have to pay. Now, those people are going to have to be helped by genuine charities that actually exist to help them, not to grift off the taxpayers and pretend to help them. But that's a much smaller percentage of the population of people on these programs. And so I think it would help the state. Indirectly, it ends up helping the voter issues, but I don't think it's as obvious as that. Let's see. James Gymnosal. Any chance? I'm assuming is what you meant. So I'm reading your question, but I'm trying to make it sound like more like a question. Any chance that they repeal the new tax on precious metals? Yes, there's a chance, because that bill was proposed by a Democrat who started to figure it out. Again, I know it's stunning, but every now and then somebody on the Democrat Party will look at something and realize it's a dumb idea, and so they'll try to repeal it. So there's a decent chance because of that, not a guarantee. And again, there's so much other drama in Olympia this cycle that I'm not sure where it's going from there. I mean, that's probably not the highest priority for most of these guys. That being said, it ends up being one of these little bills that could just slip through simply because of that. So I'd keep an eye on that one, especially if you like to buy silver and gold out there. Everybody's going to Oregon right now, or Idaho, since they don't have sales tax on it. Lots of comments here. I'm trying to find a question in this comment. Okay, here's one down here. Lower our taxes. How much are the increased taxes affecting work? This has been an awful year in Local 302 and Local 492. I don't know which ones those are. Electricians or something else. Years of work this year, companies reduced to bidding jobs at 80% of engineers' estimate to get. I think the increased taxes absolutely do affect some of the jobs that you're looking at. I'm assuming you're referring to construction jobs. And sure, I mean, you're going to have less construction in the first place, so you have fewer jobs to bid on. And so that's what you're going to see. Question: can Ferguson be impeached? This is from Mary Bennett 6718. Common question, by the way. The answer to that's no. There's really no impeachment process in Washington. People will extrapolate the political processes, because impeachment's essentially, it's legal, but it's a political process that they have in D.C. And so you can say, oh, they impeached the president. Why can't we do it to the governor? Well, you don't have that set up in the system here in Washington. For the most part, there is a process that if the Republicans controlled both houses, you could have like a no confidence kind of equivalent vote, but it doesn't really mean anything other than making a nice headline. You could do a recall petition, of course, but that requires several early steps in the process, getting approved, verified, and then you would have to have two different sets of judges, essentially, that would approve it. And that's not as easy to do as it sounds. I mean, I'm sure people think that running a recall is easy. It would cost you about $1.5 million to run a recall at a governor's size race. You might be able to do it for less, actually, because recalls tend to motivate people in a funny way that regular elections might not always attract people to go do. But it's a massive amount of time and money on something that you could put that same amount of time and money into just simply getting really solid, rock solid candidates prepared and running real campaigns in the future. That's especially true if you clean up a lot of the voter rolls. Let's see. Next question. Somebody mentioned the pocket gopher down here. Thank you for bringing that up. Blast from the past, and just as another example of incompetent stupidity on government's part. Lower our taxes. So with few companies left bidding, and these companies down to 43% of engineers, not many jobs and out of work. List 501 local. So is there a chance for tax changes will come to entice growth? Yes, they will, but you'll probably have to remove a bunch of Democrats to get there. Right now, as long as the Democrats are in charge, it's convincing businesses to be in a holding pattern or to simply not do anything here, or in some cases move out of the state. None of those are good options for you if you want to have jobs there. You just simply have to remove Democrats. Okay, here it is. at LTR Razor. This is another question here. How do we open the financials and show who's getting paid to abandon their oath for profit? They forget they are to serve, and I never met a Democrat who didn't like to apply more taxes. It's not as easy as you might think. You can definitely look at pdc.wa.gov, which is the website you can look at campaign contributions. But a lot of people look at that. It's fairly open, fairly public. So number one, that's where I would look. And the first thing I would look on that is look at their financial disclosure documents. It's called an F1 document. When you go there, and every politician has it, they have to file it every single year they're in office, and go look under their financial affairs document and see where they're getting their money from and who's paying them. It won't tell you the exact amount, but it'll tell you a range. And so you get a sense of where they're getting their money. To get past that, the next level of research is, are they lying? Are they concealing information on their financial disclosure documents? And the answer to that's yes, frequently. I've disclosed this many times with many PDC complaints that I've had in the past where they've concealed or hidden stuff from their financial affairs documents. You can kind of do that by doing cross-reference checks with the Secretary of State business licensing departments. Look up they call them governors, but essentially they're officers of those businesses if they happen to own it. But if they're just getting paid cash from it and they're hiding it and that company's not reporting it, it's very hard. You would need to be in some kind of a litigation discovery situation for you to actually find something like that. So I think it's very difficult. I'm sorry. I wish I could say it was easier. Now, one of the things you can do is cultivate relationships with other people that work in that office or that have some level of familiarity with that elected official and get inside information on what's going on. And as I do this on a frequent basis, that's a great resource for you. There's always another Democrat willing to throw them under the bus. And when somebody realizes that they didn't report something, it's great to be able to throw that to the PDC and let them run down that rabbit hole and find out what's going on. Let's see. Keep going down here. Here it is. I think this is a question here. We the govern. By the way, this doesn't show up because there were spaces between we and the. But this is Mobius 4897. Have you looked into multicare losing thousands of patients due to losing state healthcare marketplace contracts? The answer to that is no, I haven't. So I've heard about it, but I have not looked into it. So I don't know anything about it, unfortunately. But I'd like to. Let's keep going down here, see if we have questions, some more questions here. Somebody's saying that I'm so uninformed. That's awesome. Susie Q57. Where is the money coming from for the prisons? Well, in theory, it's supposed to come from the state of Washington. Department of Corrections is a budget line item in the state budget, so you should be able to find it. I actually haven't looked at that one lately, so that's not one I'm really familiar with. SDUELL 60. Okay, looks like I'm going to be selling my silver out of state. When does the 10.3% metals tax start? It started, okay, this is a good question. That was a sales tax that they started to impose January 1st and has nothing to do with you selling it unless you are running a business and you're selling it to consumers. If you're going to go in and try to sell it to a coin shop or a pawn shop, the sales tax doesn't affect you at all, and you'll just be wasting your gas going to Oregon. If you're going to buy it, different story. So if you're going to go to buy it, you're going to probably need to go out of state if you want to get prices or see if they're willing to match those prices, kind of make up for the tax, which probably I don't blame them. They're not going to want to, but you can always ask. Let's see. I'm running down to these questions here. I realize there's more, but there's only so many I'm going to be able to get to here. And why don't I answer the next one, and then I'll close with something going down. Let's see. Denali I3H. Did you see Como News interview with the state auditor when they said that their policy is to trust first and verify later, but they haven't been able to verify for 4 years? Incompetence. Uh, yeah, well, I mean, listen, welcome to the state auditor's office. I mean, that is how they operate. Trust and try not to verify. That is their operating motto. Verification, if it ever comes, is always going to be years after the fact. That's assuming they actually look and that somebody doesn't convince them not to look. And that's assuming that the very narrow set of data points they look at when they go into an agency is actually where the fraud is. If you are a fraudster with an IQ over 85, usually you're able and smart enough to be able to ensure that when the state auditor comes in, they're not looking at your fraud, they're looking somewhere else where at least you made it look like there isn't any fraud. This does not mean that all the employees that work the state auditor's office are on the take or dishonest or corrupt. They just simply have a hamster wheel of work that they have to get through to process and give everybody a gold star that month. And so it's not a real audit like the way you and I might think of an audit. It's not a real audit. So now their fraud detection division, when that one gets triggered and they bring them in, those guys tend to do a much more thorough job and a better job. They can also subpoena bank records and do a little bit more, get a little more information. But anyway, so that's what's going on there. Actually, I see, there is somebody else mentioning about always assume incompetence. AAI, yep, that's a pretty much a good set of rules to have. You can assume incompetence, and that's a pretty much default setting in government. Egregious incompetence across the board, sometimes define human understanding. But then once you dig into it, that's once you get below the layer of incompetence and that veneer of protecting the narrative and pretending like you know what you're doing, you'll understand the rest of it and how bad it really is below the surface there. There's one last question I'll get to here, and then I'm going to close. So I lied last time. One last question. The Highway 3000, why is carbon tax still a thing since it's been proven a total scam? Field scam, I think is what you said there, but anyway, a total scam. Great question, and the reason is because, oh my word, this is a multi-billion-dollar operation for stealing money from the taxpayer. And so if you're a con artist, there's nothing better than the Climate Commitment Act scam, which is a carbon tax scam. And it's a way to jack up everybody's fuel cost by 25 cents, sometimes 40 cents a gallon, depends on the month. And it depends on the cost of the carbon credits that have been auctioned off. And then that cash just goes into the slush fund, which is administered theoretically by the Commerce Secretary. And it was weird. They had a turnover in the Commerce Secretary Department again. And I don't know if it's just they realize that everything's a fraud. And so they don't want to be there get with their hands in the cookie jar. They want to leave before everything gets obvious. Maybe that's why Russ Hunter left the DCYF program a year ago or so. I think these guys, some of them are smart enough. They realize how fraudulent and bad it is. So they bail out so that, the house of cards come crashing down. It's always better if you got your cash and you're somewhere else. So I think that's kind of how some of this operates. Just remember, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. From my perspective, again, if I see you at the Roanoke Conference, please make sure you come up. Let me know that you watch these live streams. I'm always wondering who would be watching a live stream at 7:20 at night on a Thursday night. But for those of you who are going to be at the conference, please make a point of coming up and talking to me. If I'm going to see you at the Doge training class, either this Saturday or Tuesday in Burien, also, again, please make a point and let me know that you watch the live stream. Also, please remember to watch some of these videos. Give me any feedback on them that you like or don't like. A lot of times I find I'm doing these late at night and because I get stuck with a lot of other drama during the day. And if I've missed something or said something that you didn't like or you think was wrong, feel free to let me know. I actually I don't have thin skin, and I like critiques, so that never bothers me much. And I do try to do the best job I can and try to do a better job for you moving forward. This is going to be a busy year. We have a crazy legislative session. This is going to be the year where we expose a lot of fraud, and this is the year the Democrats have to raise taxes to cover their fraud, or they're going to have to start cutting back on some of the fraudulent programs. Neither of those options are particularly attractive to the Democrat Party. and they're going into this legislative session, and they have 2 slush funds that they have yet to touch that could cover the fraud for another year or so, but essentially kicks the can down the road. And so the Democrats want to set themselves up so that when truly dire situations occur for them financially down the road in keeping the gravy train going and the grifting operations alive, they're hoping to be able to pull from this income tax thing. I don't know the level of success they're going to have on that. There's a lot more pushback than people realize and a lot more behind the scenes. But I think one thing to point out, one thing that should be endlessly pointed out, is the only reason they need these taxes are to cover their fraud. The fraud is real. The fraud is significant. Protecting the narrative is the primary cause of the Democrats and the media that support them. Right now, they're going to pretend like there's nothing to see there. They're trying to hide it right now. They're dancing around it, pretending it doesn't exist. But as it becomes exposed and more obvious, then they're going to have to shift into more of a defensive mode this year, and they'd rather have a lot more money to draw from so they can keep the fraud going. A lot of this gets recycled back into political campaigns, bank accounts, support networks, ballot harvesting operations, whatever. So they will die on this hill. This is an important hill for them to die on because it's a key piece, they believe, of their political power. So if for some reason the obstacles and drama is too high to get the income tax across the line, then their only real backup plan is to empty the reserve fund, or at least drain it dry a little bit, and divert the Climate Commitment Act cash away from some of the grifting operations that were kind of circling around hoping to get that. So those 2 pools of money could easily cover whatever they pretend to claim is their deficit for the next few years. But as the fraud gets exposed and the feds cut off the spigot, my guess is that there's going to be a lot more drama coming forward. Watch for a whistleblower operation and program that I'll be launching soon. As soon as I can get my act together and some of the teams of people I need to help me support this, we are going to be much more aggressive at recruiting whistleblowers all over Washington State, and I hope that that'll be very visible and obvious to you moving forward. I'm going to continue this Doge Washington training classes. If you've taken one and you haven't heard from me yet, and you're on my special secret sauce list and I need to reach out to you to help with some of this investigative work, I'm going to be doing so pretty soon. Or somebody that I've assigned to do that will be doing it. There's a lot of teams of us trying to work together out there, and a lot of unsung heroes you never see on a podcast or on a YouTube video. And it's important that you realize that you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there who are trying to make a difference in this state. And if you're watching me from another state, pay attention to what's going on in Washington State, because this is exactly what you're going to be experiencing in Idaho and North Dakota and South Dakota, Montana and Texas and everywhere else if you do not get it killed and stopped here. I mean, I think there's a recognition that we can't flee this country to another country and hope that it'll be different. It won't be. And the nature of socialism is always to be like a disease and spread further as you've destroyed a certain area. And when you defeat it and inoculate an area from it, which is, I think, Florida has successfully done to some extent, then it really does knock them back on their heels, and it sets back their plans in your state. And now you have people that recognize the danger that they're in and why it's so important to change what's happening here. I am a big fan of the Act Blue investigation that's going on by the feds. I wish it was going faster and harder, more aggressive and open. I think these fraud investigations, particularly what Bessent claims they're going to do from the Treasury Department, I think that's very important. And on top of that, I think the vote roll investigations and exposure, it's not enough on elections, but it's a good start. And for the first time since any of us have been alive, this is actually going on in our state because nobody's been paying attention anywhere. So there's a lot of work to do. This is exciting times. If you want to be in tumultuous times, we're living in some right now, whether you recognize it yet or not. And but it's worth the fight. It's worth prevailing. It's worth the energy. And it's worth the time. And nothing's easy, nor is winning and supporting freedom and liberty. So with that, guys, I'm going to close off for the night. I do hope that you enjoyed the show. Again, leave me comments down below if you think I've completely missed the boat. And remember, the future truly does belong to those who show up. So make sure the people showing up, that's going to be you and I and others who care about liberty and freedom.